The land remembers. Alara Vance felt this truth in the marrow of her bones, a low hum beneath the soles of her worn-out sneakers. It remembered the weight of glaciers and the tread of dinosaurs, things she, a paleobotanist by training, understood intimately. But lately, the land under her feet, the cracked pavement of a suburban cul-de-sac, only seemed to remember unpaid bills and the ghost of her husband's laughter. She was a doctor of ancient life, now reduced to freelance editing of dense academic papers. Each comma, she corrected a tiny monument to her financial desperation. Her son, Leo, a lanky 15-year-old with a historian's soul trapped in a teenager's body, saw her strain. He saw it in the way she'd stare at the mail, as if expecting a verdict. The verdict arrived on a Tuesday, not in a bill's cellophane window, but in a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was from a law firm in a town she'd never heard of, Harmony Creek, Virginia. Her hands, steady enough to excavate a fossilized fern frond from shale, trembled slightly as she opened it. The legalese was dense, but the core message was clear. A man she vaguely recalled from childhood stories, her great-great-grand-uncle Silas Vance, had passed away. He had left her his sole worldly possession, a defunct bookshop and the small apartment above it at 14 Cadence Street. There was no money, just property. A burden, she thought, another complication in a life already buckling under their weight. 2 weeks later, Alara's sputtering sedan pulled into Harmony Creek. The town seemed caught in amber, a collection of brick storefronts and ancient oak trees sleeping under the oppressive blanket of a Virginian summer. Leo, who had complained for the entire 6-hour drive, suddenly sat up, his eyes wide. He was looking at the faded gold lettering on a dusty shop window. Vance's Volumes and Sundries. It was flanked by a hardware store and a small diner where a handful of older men sat on the porch, watching their arrival with placid curiosity. Alara killed the engine, the sudden silence profound. Well, she sighed, this is it. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, one of the men from the diner porch ambled over. He was tall and weathered, with kind eyes crinkling at the corners. You must be Alara, he said, his voice a gentle baritone. Silas told us you might come. I'm Jedediah. We kept an eye on the place for him. He handed her a heavy iron key. He was a good man. Quiet. Said his family had a duty here. Alara thanked him, confused by the cryptic remark. A duty? Her family hadn't been in this part of the country for a century. She unlocked the door, a small bell above it giving a choked, dusty jingle. The air that rolled out was thick with the scent of decaying paper, leather, and something else, something like time itself. The bookshop was a crypt of forgotten stories. Towers of books leaned at precarious angles, dust motes dancing like fairies in the shafts of light cutting through the grime on the windows. Upstairs, the apartment was Spartan, a bed, a table, a single chair. It was clear Silas Vance had lived a life of monastic simplicity. For 2 days, Alara and Leo worked, sorting and cleaning, the task feeling as monumental as excavating a tar pit with a teaspoon. Alara felt a growing disappointment. The property was a teardown, the books mostly worthless. The trip was a waste of money she didn't have. Leo, however, was fascinated. He ran his fingers over brittle spines, captivated by the sheer history of the place. It was Leo who found it. He was trying to move a heavy oak bookshelf in the attic, a cramped space under the eaves that served as overstock storage. Mom, this floorboard is loose, he called out. Alara, weary and covered in dust, came to look. It wasn't just loose. It had been cut with intention. Using a crowbar from a neglected toolbox, she pried it up. Beneath it was not insulation, but a dark, hollow space. A hidden room. Her heart, which had been dormant with worry for months, gave a sudden, sharp thump of adrenaline. Inside, hanging from wooden pegs, were 2 Civil War uniforms, one Union blue, the other Confederate gray. They were impeccably preserved, the wool coarse but intact. Leaning in a corner was a long-barreled rifle, a model 1861 Springfield musket. And beside it, a small, leather-bound journal. Leo reached for the musket, his eyes shining with awe. Careful, Alara whispered, her scientific mind taking over. She checked the rifle with practiced ease, a skill learned during field research in remote areas. Her breath caught in her throat. It was loaded. A single, heavy lead ball sat ready in the chamber, the percussion cap still on the nipple. It had been waiting for over 150 years. She gently took the journal. The first page was written in a looping, elegant script. "My name is Captain Elias Vance," it began. "I have borne witness to both the valor and the greed of this war. I have been entrusted with a secret of profound importance, one that must be protected from those who would exploit it for gain. I have hidden the truth, not just the location of the lost Confederate treasury, but the record of the men who betrayed both sides to possess it. This book is the key. The land remembers, and so must we." Alara sat on the dusty floor, the weight of the journal in her lap feeling heavier than a slab of stone. A lost treasury? A record of betrayal? This was no longer a worthless inheritance. This was a legacy. Her ancestor, Elias Vance, had been a guardian. Silas, in his quiet, simple life, had continued that guardianship. And now, the heavy iron key and the loaded musket had been passed to her. The next day, a sleek, black car with tinted windows pulled up in front of the shop. A man in a tailored suit, his face a mask of polite indifference, stepped out. He introduced himself as a lawyer for the Thorne Development Corporation. "Dr. Vance," he said, somehow already knowing her name and title. "My client, Mr. Marcus Thorne, has a sentimental interest in this block. He is prepared to offer you $250,000 for this property." As Alara stared at him. The offer was absurdly high. It was more money than she had seen in her life. It was enough to solve every problem she had. But it was also a blaring alarm. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady. "What's his sentimental interest?" The lawyer's smile was thin. "Mr. Thorne's family has deep roots in this region. He wishes to create a historical preservation project." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it was almost convincing. Almost. She thought of the loaded musket. She thought of Elias's words, "protected from those who would exploit it for gain." "The property is not for sale," Alara said. The lawyer's polite mask didn't slip, but a flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes. "That would be a mistake, Dr. Vance. Development in this area can create unforeseen complications for small property owners." It was a threat, wrapped in the silken ribbon of corporate jargon. After he left, Alara felt a chill despite the humid air. She took the journal to the local college and found the history department. Its head was Dr. Eris Thorne, a man in his late 60s with a kind, academic stoop and a reputation for being the foremost expert on the region's Civil War history. The shared surname with the corporate titan gave her a moment's pause, but Jedediah had assured her Eris was a different breed entirely. Eris handled the journal with reverent hands. He read the first page, his eyes widening. "Elias Vance," he breathed. "The ghost of the valley." He was a legend. A Union intelligence officer who moved through Confederate lines like a phantom. It was rumored he was tasked by Lincoln himself to recover a rogue treasury shipment before it could fall into the wrong hands. It was never found. History records him as having died in a skirmish a week before Appomattox. He looked at Alara, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. This journal, if it's real, isn't just a historical artifact. It's a national treasure, and it is incredibly dangerous. Marcus Thorne's family, the ones who founded the corporation, they made their fortune right after the war. The story was they found a lost cotton shipment. But there were always whispers of something else, something darker. The next move from Marcus Thorne was not subtle. He arrived himself, stepping out of a helicopter that landed in a nearby field, whipping up a storm of dust and leaves. He was an imposing man in his 70s, with a hawk-like face and eyes that seemed to strip away all pretense. He bypassed the pleasantries. "Dr. Vance, I am doubling the offer. $500,000. That is my final word." He gestured dismissively at the crumbling facade of the shop. "This building is worthless. The land has some minor strategic value for a tourism route my company is planning. Take the money. Go back to your life." His arrogance was a physical force. "Mr. Thorne," Alara said, her voice quiet but firm. "My ancestor left me a responsibility, not just a building. I can't sell it." Thorne's face hardened into a granite mask. "Your ancestor was a meddler and a thief. My family built this region. You are standing in the way of progress. I suggest you reconsider what is best for you and your son." The mention of Leo was a cold shard of ice in her chest. The threat was no longer veiled. That night, guided by a riddle in Elias's journal about the shadow of the chimney at noon, Alara and Leo dug beneath a loose hearthstone in the apartment's fireplace. They found a small, lead-lined box. Inside were not gold coins, but a series of intricately engraved brass discs. They were coded. A message from heiress Thorne arrived via a secure messaging app. An old acquaintance of his, deep inside Thorne Development, had confirmed Marcus was searching for a primary asset on this specific property, something his family had been seeking for generations. The Attorney General's office, which already had an open investigation into Thorne Development's predatory practices, had been alerted. An assistant AG named Ms. Davies called Alara, offering legal protection. Alliances were forming in the shadows. The escalation came 2 nights later. A loud crash woke them from a restless sleep. Downstairs, the front window of the bookshop was shattered, and several bookshelves had been overturned. It was a crude act of intimidation, meant to terrorize them. It did the opposite. It solidified Alara's resolve into something unbreakable. The line had been crossed. This was no longer about money or history. It was about justice. The following day, Leo received a strange message on his social media. It was from a boy his age, who identified himself as Ethan Thorne, Marcus Thorne's grandson. "My grandfather is obsessed," the message read. "He talks about reclaiming his birthright and righting a historical wrong. He keeps an old family Bible in his study. He reads from it every night. I think it has something to do with you." Ethan, torn by his grandfather's increasingly erratic behavior, sent Leo a photo of a specific page from that Bible. It was a family tree, but tucked into the back, almost hidden, was a handwritten entry dated 1866. It was a note written by Marcus Thorne's great-grandfather, Augustine Thorne. It spoke of a terrible secret. His wife, it turned out, was not who she claimed to be. She was the secret daughter of a Union officer who had died near the end of the war. An officer named Elias Vance. The note was filled with rage and shame, speaking of the tainted bloodline and his vow to one day reclaim the Vance fortune that he believed his wife's father had stolen and hidden. The world tilted on its axis. Marcus Thorne wasn't just the descendant of the man who had likely betrayed Elias. He was Elias Vance's descendant, too. His obsession wasn't just corporate greed. It was a twisted, generational quest for a legacy he didn't even understand. This whole conflict was a dark, hidden family tragedy. Armed with this earth-shattering knowledge, Alara went back to the hidden room in the attic. She examined the journal again, this time not as a historian, but as a relative. Tucked into a tiny, sewn-shut pocket on the inside cover, her fingers found a thin, folded document. It was a birth certificate, issued by a traveling Union Army chaplain, for a girl named Mary Vance, born to Elias Vance and a local woman he had secretly married. It was proof, the final piece of the puzzle. The next morning, Alara Vance, accompanied by her lawyer from the Attorney General's office, walked into the gleaming, sterile lobby of Thorne Development headquarters. She didn't ask for a meeting. She walked directly to the executive floor, her presence so unexpected and purposeful that security hesitated just long enough for her to reach the glass-walled boardroom. Marcus Thorne was in the middle of a hostile takeover presentation, his voice booming with authority. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw her, his face a thundercloud of fury. "I told you our business was concluded," he snarled. "I'm here to decline your final offer," Alara said, her voice clear and carrying through the silent room. The board members stared, confused. "But I have a counter-proposal." She walked to the head of the table. She wasn't there to expose him publicly, to humiliate him. She was there to deliver a truth. "For generations, your family has been trying to reclaim a treasure you believed my family stole from you. You were wrong." She placed the worn leather journal on the polished mahogany table. Then, she slid a single, sealed envelope across its surface towards him. "This isn't about the Confederate treasury, Mr. Thorne. It never was. The real treasure was the truth." Marcus Thorne stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a copy of the birth certificate and a single, handwritten letter from Alara. It didn't contain threats or demands. It simply explained what she had discovered. It laid out their shared, tragic, and undeniable bloodline. She was not his enemy. She was his family. The iron composure of the corporate titan shattered. The color drained from his face. He looked from the paper to Alara, his eyes filled not with rage, but with a profound, soul-shaking confusion. The history he had built his identity on was a lie. The man he reviled as a thief was his own great-grandfather. He sank into his chair, a powerful man made suddenly small by a truth the land had remembered long after his family had chosen to forget. The resolution was not a courtroom victory or a corporate defeat, but a quiet, difficult reconciliation. Marcus Thorne, a changed man, stepped down as CEO. He and Alara, the reluctant guardians of a shared, complicated legacy, formed a new entity, the Vance Thorne American Heritage Foundation. Thorne Development provided the funding, Alara provided the historical assets and the moral compass, and the state provided oversight. The lost treasury, eventually located through the decoded brass discs, was turned over to the federal government, its recovery rewriting a chapter of Civil War history. 5 years later, the dusty old bookshop at 14 Caden Street was the heart of a thriving educational center. The building had been beautifully restored, its upstairs apartment now Alara's office, where she served as the foundation's director. Tourists and historians came to see the witness collection, the preserved uniforms, and the artifacts of Elias Vance's life. Leo, now a history major at William and Mary, spent his summers working as a lead researcher at the center, his passion now his purpose. One crisp autumn afternoon, Alara stood on the porch, watching a group of schoolchildren listen, captivated, as Jedediah told them stories of the town's past. A car pulled up, and Marcus Thorne got out. He looked older, softer, the hard edges worn smooth by time and truth. They didn't speak for a long moment, simply sharing the peaceful silence. He would be proud, Marcus said quietly. Elias, he would be proud of what you've built here. What we've built, Alara nodded, a small smile touching her lips as she looked out over the town her family had a duty to. The land remembers, she thought. And sometimes, if we're lucky, it helps us remember, too.